Senator Mark Begich and Congressman Denny Heck discussed pending legislation in Congress affecting credit unions here at CUNA's Governmental Affairs Conference. First, I wanted to start by asking you what it means in terms of your re-election to have credit union support and CUNA behind you.
Well, they're a great organization. They represent over 400,000 Alaskans, so they have a great network of folks out there that recognize the support that I've done for credit unions. So credit unions are an important part. They are politically active, but they're also people, real people in their neighborhoods, in their towns that represent real Alaskans.
CUNA's CEO Bill Cheney said in one of his speeches that the CFPB is looking for ways to relieve credit unions of some of their rules, their regulatory burden for credit unions. What areas do you think could be relieved in terms of the regulatory burden for credit unions?
Well, there's two parts. First off, as a member of the Government Services Committee, which is under Homeland Security, this is where a lot of that regulatory issue falls under, even though it's banking. So we'll have some role here. Second, I think there's a lot of opportunity. For example, one simple thing, which is an easy bipartisan bill. I get a notice every year, like everyone does, on, in case of you get this notice for your credit union or your credit card, whatever it might be, telling you about privacy. There's been no changes, it's just they got to send this piece of mail. If we would just eliminate that, if you have a change in your privacy policy, then send it. But if you don't waste the money. It is thousands and thousands of these that go out I get 3 or 4 of these every year from different organizations, and nothing's changed. As one simple thing. That for the consumer is one less piece of paper they got to deal with. For the customer or for the credit union, it's one more piece of paper they don't have to mail and process. There's also some other regulatory issues around their capital that we should focus on, but there's quite a list. And again, as I said here today, they weren't the problem with the financial crisis of this country. If anything, the credit unions were the stable backbone that protected a lot of our lenders and a lot of our folks out there. So we need to find those areas that just take it out of the list. They don't need additional paperwork. We have other institutions that were the driver of the financial crash. They're the ones we need to focus on.
Like the Supplemental Capital Bill, for example?
Right. That's an example, yeah. The Supplemental Capital Bill, that's an example of a piece of legislation that we should be looking at. Also working with the regulatory end to see if there's anything regulatory that we can get relief now rather than just waiting for legislation.
So I wanted to start by asking you about supplemental capital, the bill that's sitting in Congress right now. What do you think needs to be done to push that forward and ultimately get it passed by the end of this session?
Well, most importantly, I think Chairman Henserling needs to get the message that this is something that if he did allow to be heard and voted on and get to the floor of the House, we'd probably have 300 votes for it. We would probably have 300 votes for it. The Supplemental Capital Bill, almost counterintuitively, is, I think, a great tool to function counter-cyclically, because it's exactly when the economy is cratering or declining that access to supplemental capital could allow credit unions to grow, and by growing, to make more loans. So I think it's important for the long-term health of the economy that we enact it.
Sponsored by a Republican, Peter King. Why do you think it hasn't gone further than the committee at this point?
That's a question best put to the chair, Congressman Jeb Henserling. He's the one that has made that determination.
Now, looking at member business lending as well, that's something that's sitting in Congress that the trade organizations want passed. What do you think the impact of that bill could be for credit unions going forward, and why do you think that's important as well?
Well, in other states it probably have more of an impact than it would in mine because we already have a higher member business lending limit in Washington state. But if you stop and think about this in the bigger picture, one of the number one issues of growing the economy is small business access to capital. So I think the answer is frankly a little self-evident.
In Washington, I'm Nicholas Balassi, Credit Union Times.